Welcome to River Styx Nonfiction Q&A series RS&F. I'm Matt Torralba Andrews, assistant editor at River Styx, and I'm joined by River Styx nonfiction co-editor Claire Walla. Today we're speaking with our guest, Darien Gee, about her piece Kin in River Styx. Darien is the author of 5 novels published by Penguin Random House that have been translated into 11 languages. She's also a writer of poetry and nonfiction, including the poetry chapbook Other Small Histories and the memoir Writing the Hawaii Memoir. She was born in St. Louis and now lives with her family on the Big Island of Hawaii. Thank you for joining us, Darien.
Thanks for having me.
For our first question, we wanted to ask about process. One thing that really stuck out to both me and Matt is how much you pack into your essay about these 4 women's lives, and it's just around 500 words. And I know that you're particularly skilled at Flash. So in terms of process, I wonder where you start, and do you have to parse down a lot of information, or does it come to you in a shorter form?
With this piece, I knew I was probably going to be leaning towards economy. So I kind of knew that starting out. And I have been, writing and sort of teaching more on the micro side, which is closer to like 300 words. And I knew I wasn't going to go much more than 600, I thought, for this piece. And those are sort of constraints that I put on myself, not necessarily for any particular reason. But I think what I usually do is give myself permission to go as large as I need to go. I'm going to go as big as I need to go. The advantage that I had with this piece was that I had sort of done a lot of pre-paving before, and I had originally thought it was really going to just be about Maggie G, who is not related. Well, nobody in this is really related to me by blood except for myself. But as a G, which is my married name, I was really interested in Maggie G, who was an American aviator during World War II. And so I had thought, oh, it's just going to be about her and this whole idea of like kinship and what that means and how we're connected. And so I thought I was going to go on a full essay actually about that for like 600 words. And so that's where the surprise came about. And so even though my word count was in kind of the ballpark of where I wanted to be, the form was, and then ultimately the fact that I folded in 2 other women and then myself, because I did not plan to put myself in the piece other than as the speaker, that was unexpected. So, I think as a writer, I'm very much a pantser, not just as a fiction writer, but pretty much in every way I approach my work. And that was more surprising. So even as I started to write this piece and I was writing Maggie's section, I could just feel the economy coming in, and I just kind of felt like, I'm not going to go 600 words with her. So now what? And that's where I started to bring in these other women. And it might have gone differently, I think, if I hadn't felt maybe the pull towards this particular subject.
And kind of related to this, think about structure. And so as Claire was mentioning, that it's structured in these sort of vignettes, these vignette-like sections, each one focusing on a different woman and part of a kind of a family tree in a way, including yourself at the end. And could you talk a little bit about how that the process of identifying that structure, was this something that came about in the writing process and having this kind of order where it seems even too that the gaps between the white spaces is important?
Yeah, I'm a big believer, especially I think when you write in such a small form like micro, a white space is a really big deal for me. I think that's where, if you were going to sort of lean the prose more towards the poetic form, looking at how something might appear on a page, the fact that in general, this work is a little bit longer, so it might fold, say, to 2 pages if it was in print form, but generally I like things to be on 1 page so that a reader can experience it and see, for example, these women all on 1 page. It's different when you turn the page and then, oh, there's one more woman over there on that page, right? And so sort of having them all be on 1 page is a big deal for me because they're all together. I do feel like, in my experience, process is really where all the discovery happens. I can plan this out as much as I want to in advance, and sometimes I have really good ideas about what I think I want the piece to do or how I'm going to work with my ideas. And sometimes that happens. Usually it doesn't, which is, thank goodness, right? Because that's where all of the surprises come in. Like I said, with this, I started with Maggie. So actually, when I had looked back to some of my original drafts, hers was the first one I had written. And then when I realized I'm still playing with this issue of what it means for me to be a G, for Chinese, people who have the last name G, they all kind of come from the same village in China. It's a very large village. So it's actually not that far-fetched that actually somewhere along the way, they were probably, well, at least my husband's family, all the G's are related from the same village. They're from Toisan or from Taishan and Guangzhou. So that's not a huge stretch. And of course, ultimately, aren't we all related, right? When you go far enough, but which is another point that I think I'm also trying to make, with this piece, right? It's like, what does it really take for us to say that we are or are not family? And that was Julia, who is the first G that ends up being in this piece, was really a big part of my poetry collection, because she is probably the one person in the poetry collection who actually is not related to me by blood, and was the one family member who nobody spoke of and didn't really want to acknowledge, because some people consider her my grandfather's mistress. I consider her his third wife, because they actually had a civil ceremony. They had 2 children together, one of who died, and they were together for a long time, but he was also married to my grandmother at the same time, and they were all Christians, so it was very complicated. It wasn't like these old days where, you had multiple wives and that was a thing. It was wartime, and it was just difficult. And so it was important for me. I think obviously I wasn't done. I wasn't done with that. And so that came in, and it just pulled in all these issues. And so I feel like sometimes when you have these ideas that are still bouncing around in your body or in your brain or in your heart, and you're trying to get something down form wise, no matter how many other clever things people have done or devices you've seen, or ideas you might have in terms of structure, both your material, your own life experience, and I think if you're paying attention how the work really wants to present itself, if you're willing to just kind of listen, it just kind of tells you. And I really don't like to show up on my own work, even though that seems to be the case the past 6 years. I think that's really one reason why I started out with fiction and actually returned to fiction for that reason. But when you write creative nonfiction, there's just like no way around it. You're of course you're in the work. And so that was actually a really important part of this whole essay, was how I fit in, how I saw myself. And so I think I'm kind of, probably meandering again, even in responding to your question, but I think that's always been the process for me, is that meandering. It's just like, instead of trying to say the river has to go this way and kind of carve a path down the mountain like that, you're saying, oh, I guess we're going around this bend and we're going through these trees and this, and then you're just kind of following it where it goes. And it's not always comfortable, and it feels like it's kind of unnecessary, and it takes longer, but it is what it is. And then in the end, you kind of go, oh, I guess that's why, that's what was trying to happen on the page, and you can't see it until you're done.
Going to ask about kinship, and you've mentioned it a couple times, so it seems to be, I'm getting that it was at the beginning of the writing process that you knew this theme was kind of bubbling up.
I feel like titles can do a lot of heavy lifting for a piece, so they always tend to be one of my favorite things to do or to kind of puzzle out with a piece. But I did not name this piece until it was done. So I had not been like, this is a piece about kinship and this is a piece about kin and family. I was just like, this is a piece about Maggie and how cool she was, because she was this Asian American pilot and she has the same last name as me. Well, my married last name, and what I was going to go down this whole, I don't know, feminist kind of route. And like, she's just like, she's just a really cool person. So I was wrapped up in that kind of a narrative starting out of where I was going to go with it. And, for me, when I realized what it was, and then the name was like, the title just came to me, I was like, well, of course, right? That's what this is. And that's what this is about. The thing about, labels are so incomplete in general, right? Especially when it comes to relationship. And I think what I love about the word kin is just this idea of how we choose to make something or call something our own.
And we ask all our guests this. And, do you have a nonfiction reading recommendation to share with our listeners and readers?
I do. And the book that I'm recommending is this book, which is called, I don't know, it's maybe a little blurry in front of me. There we go. It's called The Next Draft, Inspiring Craft Talks from the Rainier Writing Workshop. The editor is Brenda Miller, who is the Brenda Miller, if you all know, she teaches a lot with, she teaches a lot with essay and creative nonfiction, especially Hermit Crab essay is something that she is known for and teaches quite a lot. One of my reasons for recommending this book is it is an anthology, so it's a gathering of all of the craft talks or morning talks that happened in the program. I am a graduate of the program. I went back and got my MFA at 50, even though I'd already been published. I am one of these people who believes there's always room to learn, especially when it comes to writing. It doesn't matter if you're already published. I did have some people who had said, "Why are you here? You're already published." And that was actually where I had a pivot, a real pivot for myself. I hadn't expected it. And I think if you as a writer come into the space of there's always more to learn and you are curious about what's possible for you as a writer, you're going to be rewarded for that curiosity. And I think that's really what is really wonderful for anyone who is looking to just explore more as a writer, is just getting that cross section of different voices, different genres, and just again being open to learning and seeing what's out there for themselves as writers.